Hey, Money Nerds. Today we're going to talk about something that might be a bit uncomfortable, but is important to understand that there is a cost to low self-worth. So we're going to be diving into that topic today. When we're talking about self-worth, there's a giant difference between self-confidence and self-esteem. When we're talking about self-confidence, that's understanding that you can do something. You're confident enough to do something. Confidence comes from competence, and competence comes from experience. And so if you're trying to boost up your self-confidence, maybe it's trying to be a better investor or being a comfortable investor, you have to go through the experience piece to get to that level. When it comes to your self-esteem, that is a little separate than self-confidence. Your self-esteem is how do you feel about who you are as a person, your worthiness, your value in the world, your contributions. It's so much deeper than just, can I do financial tasks? It's how do I feel about my finances? But more than that, what do I make that mean about myself? And for so many of us, a low self-worth, it will impact our finances in very, very drastic ways. And this isn't discussed enough. Often are just talking about the surface level stuff, the how do you budget better? How do you pay down credit card debts? How do you finance a new car? Should you move into that new home or not? But the low self-esteem and that low self-worth, that portion shows up very differently in our finances. So here are some of the things that I find that low self-worth will impact when it comes to your money. The first is under earning. This is a tell-all indicator. If you are a smart, intelligent, competent person, but you are constantly under earning, and how you know if you're under earning is when you look at the ranges for salary based on your experience and your expertise, how much is that range realistically? If you find yourself to always be at the low end of the range or not even in that range, that's a great indicator that you are very likely being underpaid and you're also an under earner. Now, what happens with this is when you're constantly under earning, what can sometimes happen is you're not going for the jobs that will pay more because you don't feel like you're good enough or have enough experience for that. It's always lacking there. That will for sure impact your income potential. Another thing is if you do identify that maybe you are underpaid, it's not staying underpaid, but if you have low self-esteem, you are very likely going to be staying underpaid. You're constantly going to be struggling with money because you are not, again, you're not going for those opportunities because you don't think you're worthy of those. You don't feel like you're good enough for that. You don't feel like you have enough experience. And so that is another way too. It's not just necessarily under earning, it's under earning, but then staying underpaid. That's how low self-worth can show up. Another way that this can show up is constantly overspending for validation. If you are spending money to try to make yourself look better or feel better, that is something that you're seeking validation from, and it will catch up to you every single time financially. It's going to amount to oftentimes lots of credit card debt. It's going to amount to constantly feeling like you have to buy something in order to feel a certain way instead of just feeling a certain way because you deserve and you're worthy of that. It's going to show up in a lot of different ways, but that overspending for validation, man, this is a big one. I see this a lot with coaching clients where they make great money and on paper should be absolutely crushing it with their finances, but they have some type of low self-esteem or some point to prove where they feel like they need the nicer house because if they have the nicer house, everybody's going to respect them and think that they're doing okay financially. If you have the nicer car, then it looks like you are not struggling with money. Even though behind the scenes, when you look at some of these numbers, it's one missed paycheck away from a really, really bad financial time. It's the verge of bankruptcy, but it doesn't appear that way on the outside because we're constantly trying to show that we're better with our money than we actually are. We're trying to prove a point. And this is something where I think a lot of us do spend. We overspend on validation often. It looks different for everybody though. Sometimes it's going out to eat and being the one that raises your hand and says, hey, I'll buy this time. Even though you know you have $50 in your checking account and you can't afford it and it's going to be going on a credit card and you're paying interest on that credit card. When you know that, but you're still raising your hand because you want to overcompensate and get some form of validation and give back, that's an issue. And a lot of times that does come from low self-worth. Another way that this shows up, and this one is a big one, is accepting unequal relationships. I could go on for hours about this one, so I'll try to be as brief as I can. When you are having low self-worth, you will overcompensate in relationships in a lot of ways. And sometimes it's settling for relationships where it's very unequal. And it can also be highly abusive and emotionally manipulative in some ways. Sometimes what I see is, I'll give you an example of this that I have seen. There is a person that I know that has very low self-esteem. She never feels like she's good enough. She always feels dumb, ugly, fill in the blank, unqualified, not enough in any means of the word. And it's really sad. It's a sad reality to live in. But what happens is she often attracts the biggest loser guys I've ever seen, like just going to be very, very upfront. And these are men that will often take advantage of her. And it's so sad because they are not at all on equal footings, but because she has low self-esteem, she will overcompensate, and she will do that to a financial detriment of herself in order to try to appease this partnership. And that's where it gets really messy, because oftentimes when we have such low self-esteem, we don't see that we deserve more than that. We don't see that we deserve better. And that's where it becomes a problem, because then you're stuck in these situations where it's really unhealthy and really toxic for you, but you don't think that you are worth more than that. So you stay there. And it's a really sad reality, because it all comes down to self-esteem, but that impacts your finances as well. If you're in a relationship where you don't feel like you are an equal, you don't feel like you're good enough, then you might find yourself in a really abusive financial relationship where you have to ask permission for money, or you're given a quote unquote allowance. And hear me out, guys. I know some of you do allowances. I'm not saying that's the worst thing ever, like not at all. But if it's like, here's your money and that's all you have to spend because you're not worthy of the financial budget or being privy to that, that is an issue in a relationship. You should definitely be on the same page when it comes to communication about money and transparency. And if you're not, a lot of times that can stem from low self-worth on what you're willing to accept. Another way that low self-esteem shows up is not negotiating. Now, this is not the only way it shows up. When it comes to negotiation, there is an element of discomfort that comes up when we are asking for what we want. We're trying to ask for more. It can feel a little uncomfortable. And that's normal. Again, it's going to feel uncomfortable if you don't do it on a normal basis. But it's that little act of courage, that little step where you say, you know what, maybe I will see where this goes, and maybe I will just ask for more or negotiate for what I want. That little act of courage, that comes from inside. That's the self-esteem piece of whether or not you feel like you are worthy or can, or, you're just going to put yourself out there and try. But people with very low self-esteem don't even take that chance or that risk because they are afraid of rejection. They're afraid of being judged poorly. They already feel like crap about themselves. They don't want to make it worse by inviting more crap into their life. So we often just avoid the stuff that is so important, but feels heavy or feels like it's going to weigh on us in a different light. When we feel like we're going to be judged by our decisions, we're probably not going to make those decisions if we have low self-esteem. If you have a decent level of self-esteem or high self-esteem, you usually don't care as much about what people think. It's not saying you're immune to that. You still have some filter, of course, it still penetrates a little bit, but it's not to the same degree. It's not debilitating. It's just something where you're like, man, that sucks to hear that, but I'm going to move on with my life. When you have low self-esteem, it's, oh my gosh, I can't hear that or I will literally perish. It's a feeling of true detriment. And so that's really the difference there between negotiating when you have low self-esteem versus higher self-esteem. You won't even take that chance because you don't even feel like you're worthy enough. Okay, another way that low self-esteem will show up in our finances is not even taking the step of investing. Now, being afraid to invest in some ways is normal. When we're focusing on the confidence piece, confidence comes from competence. Competence comes from experience. So if you aren't investing because you're afraid of it, and it feels uncomfortable, that's normal. You probably have not invested before. So it makes sense on why that would feel so uncomfortable for you. But when you have low self-esteem, it's being so afraid of that where it's almost paralyzing, where you don't even want to make the wrong choice. If you invest in something and it goes flop, then you make that mean that you are a personal failure. You as a person are a failure, not the investment failed. It's you internalize it. So that's the huge difference there. And then of course, we all know with compound interest and growth, if you're not investing and you're not in the stock market, it will hurt you long term. You absolutely need to be investing at least somewhat, and you need to be in the know of basic financial literacy so that you can start to build wealth on your own and have that freedom. The money has options. We want all of that for you. But when you have really low self-esteem, usually whatever you're drastically afraid of, you kind of avoid like the plague. Another way that low self-esteem will show up is feeling like wealth is for other people. That's a them thing. That's not for me. And a lot of this comes down to childhood wounds and the way money was discussed when we were kids and childhood trauma. But sometimes it's also racial classes we see this a lot with. We see this a lot with different economic levels. So it does show up in a lot of ways too. But that whole feeling of this is something for other people, not for me, I don't deserve this, that's a true indicator of low self-esteem or low self-worth. When you feel good about yourself, you feel like you belong in that room, damn it. It doesn't matter if there's so many other people that are way ahead of you or further down the road, it doesn't matter because you feel like you belong in the room in part of the conversation where you can learn about building wealth and you can learn about investing and you can better your finances. We see this a lot with career dynamics in the workplace. Back in the day when Lean In, the book, became really popular, it was a very controversial book now, but at the time it was really profound. And one of the things that we were starting to see is that when you, as a woman, I'm going to speak to a woman right now, when you go into a board meeting, let's say it's primarily 90% men, 10% female, which is usually true for workplaces. It's starting to change, but it's not there yet. When you see that dynamic, a lot of times women will not sit at the board table. We kind of sit back. We sit back and we take notes. And that's what we started to observe in workplaces. That's like, I don't feel like I belong in this room, so I'm going to be as far to the edge as I can so that I feel a little bit more comfort. This is true for wealth building too. When we don't feel like wealth building is something that's attainable for us, or we haven't seen people that look like us, act like us, came from the same socioeconomic levels, when we haven't seen people that are like us start to build wealth, it's easy to feel like it's not for you. You don't belong there. And that is so not true. You absolutely belong there and you deserve to be there. And you may not believe that quite yet yourself, but that's why we have this podcast, is to give you the confidence and the skills to boost you up so that you can understand that you do belong there, damn it. Wealth building is not something that needs to be excluded from you. You are included in that conversation. You might have to force your way into the conversation for you to actually start to believe that yourself, but you belong there. It's something that you can take control of. So let's talk a little bit about the difference between self-esteem and self-worth and what you can do to start boosting this up. So self-esteem is how you feel about yourself. Self-worth is the underlying belief that you have value simply because you are you. It's regardless of your achievements, regardless of your income, regardless of your debt load, relationship status, regardless of that, you have value as a human. When you don't have that self-worth piece, that's the part that we're going to focus on how you can start to build that self-worth up. So you have a little bit more confidence, you start to have a little bit more self-esteem, and you are really bettering your life and feeling good about who you are. So I'm going to be honest, I am by no means an expert here, and I have for sure struggled with my own self-worth and self-esteem over the years as well. Not immune to that. I for sure deal with that on a somewhat normal basis in different areas of my life. This is just some things that I have observed in my own life and that I've learned through therapy and through thousands of hours of interviews and books. It's one of those things where I've started to learn some patterns for how we can start to boost up our self-worth. One of the first things that we can do is start by keeping our promises to ourselves. Now, this is a biggie because a lot of times that follow through is hard to do when you feel overwhelmed, you feel burned out, you feel like you're not worthy. It's kind of hard to keep promises to yourself. So if that's where you're at, start with very small promises. And we'll tie this to finances since this is a financial podcast. One of the ways you can do this is just this month, I'm going to make sure that every single bill is paid on time and in full. That's it. And that may be a struggle for you. It might be something you do normally. And if that's the case, okay, move on to something else. You can start to really keep your promises to yourself to show you that you are a reliable narrator in your own life. You can do this. You can take control of it. You're not a victim in your life. You actually have some say in the direction. Another way that this could show up for your finances of keeping promises to yourself is setting a budget and sticking to it. Now, I'm not saying every single line item needs to be adhered to perfectly, But if we can at least stick to one budgeted item and really follow through on that, it does start to boost up your self-worth. You start to understand that you have some power. And again, a lot of this self-worth stuff feels like powerlessness. So when you start to keep your promises to yourself and you're sticking to that one budget, that one line item, it can really help in this way. Maybe another thing that you did is you said you were going to invest this month, but you haven't historically. If you say you're going to, make sure you actually do that this month, no matter what. It's a small thing, but keeping promises to yourself is drastic when it comes to your self-worth. Okay, another thing that I really love when it comes to increasing our self-worth is understanding that your identity and your circumstances are entirely separate. It's not the same. Your income, your debt load, your job title, none of that means that you are a good or a bad person. It doesn't actually mean anything about you as an individual. But sometimes we do identify with certain aspects of our life, like our net worth or our job or our role in the household. We start to really identify as that person instead of understanding that that's just the circumstance that we're in when it comes to life. I see this a lot where people say, I'm bad with money. I'm just not good at money. I'm just bad at it. And I hate that because it's an identity. You've identified yourself as someone who's bad at money. If you think that's who you are truly, do you think you're going to be taking steps to better yourself? No, right? You're going to always self-sabotage because you feel like you are bad with money. So you're going to likely stay there for quite some time. So that's one of the issues that I see when it comes to identities. So instead of saying I'm bad with money, say I'm taking active steps to better my finances every single week. That's a lot more empowering. It is a subtle shift, but it really helps you take on some new identities and break out of this feeling like a victim in your life. It also really helps you understand that mistakes are not something that we can avoid. It doesn't mean anything about you as an individual. It just means that it's part of the natural process of bettering your life in general. It's not who you are. Another way to start increasing your self-worth is to start to slowly boost your confidence. Now, again, we've talked about this in tons of different episodes and even a lot in this episode too. Your confidence comes from your competence. Your competence comes from your experience. If you are not very comfortable or confident with a new skill, no shit, you've never done that skill before. You're not going to be comfortable with it. So when you start to take small, controlled actions that ease you into learning a new skill, listening to a podcast episode on investing, or maybe it's watching a YouTube video on investing, or maybe it's actually just doing the damn investing. You just go buy one ETF and say, I'm going to figure it out and watch this one. When you start to do that over and over, and that repetition is important here, then you'll start to understand that you can control that confidence piece when it comes to your skills. We're not fixed. We can evolve, we can learn new things, and we can apply those new things, and you will be a much more confident person. And let's break this down because I'm in toddler mode with my little one these days, but I've been watching her learn new skills very rapidly. And it's always so enlightening to see how the kids approach learning new skills. Okay, she didn't grow out of the womb learning how to run. Of course, right? She didn't even know how to walk. She didn't know how to climb stairs. She didn't know how to do any of that stuff. For most of her life, it was like she didn't even know how to eat for a time period. It was like a huge ordeal for us. So even the basic skills of teaching her how to eat without choking, how to climb stairs, how to walk. These are all basic things. But now imagine, and this is so unrealistic, but if she was learning how to walk and she fell, which she does, that does not mean she should give up and she's terrible and she's never going to learn how to walk and she doesn't deserve to walk and she's just an awful person. No, right? Like nobody would say that. But for some reason, as adults, when we make financial mistakes, we do take it to that weird extreme level. And that does come down to your self-worth. So instead of focusing on all the things that went wrong, you have to focus on the small things that you did to take steps to boost up your confidence. When you have that confidence and that repetition, you start to feel a little bit better about who you are as a person outside of these circumstances. Knowledge really does reduce fear. Another way to start boosting up your self-esteem is to stop outsourcing your worth. Guys, I have been there before too, so I say this with so much love and compassion because this is something for so long I also did. My worth was tied to external validation of all types. It was the compliments, it was the job promotions, it was likes, followers, relationship status, income, like all of those things really impacted my validation of how I felt. If I wasn't receiving those things, then I didn't feel like I was doing enough or I wasn't good enough or people weren't seeing my value. And that's total BS. It's not something that you Your value isn't earned, it's inherent. And so when you start to get confused on that, you start to fish externally for validation. And listen, all of those things feel good. If you get compliments from strangers, if you have likes and followers on Instagram, if you have a high income, if you get that promotion, it does feel good. And it's not saying you are never like fazed by that. Of course it feels good, but it's saying that that doesn't determine when you put your head on the pillow at night, that doesn't determine how you feel about yourself. It doesn't make you say, I'm worthy or I'm not worthy. I have value in the world or I don't. It has nothing to do with that. That happens regardless, and it's a nice bonus, but it doesn't impact how you feel like you are as a human. So here's a question you can ask yourself to help you uncover this and to start to work through some of this. If all of those things disappeared, my income went away, my likes and followers, my compliments from strangers, my promotions, if all of that went away, would I still be proud of who I am? And if the answer is no, then that's a good indicator that we got to dig a little bit deeper and we got to start working on the self-esteem stuff. But a lot of that does come from understanding if we are getting external or internal validation. If you feel like you're thriving on external validation and that's the only thing that's really pushing you to get you to grow, then that's a good indicator that maybe we need to start to focus on some of the internal stuff, the little daily things that we do that we're proud of ourselves for, the being proud of yourself because you're a good person, because you are kind to strangers, because you are a great parent, you're a fantastic friend, you show up for the people you love. Those are all things that you can make mean about you. You are a good person at the end of the day. You have value. Those other things, if they disappeared, would you still be proud of who you are? Then we need to start to create evidence or collect data. Your brain will start to collect evidence naturally. It does this all the time. We're constantly looking for data points that support or disprove certain beliefs about ourselves, our lives, and the world around us. We are naturally very good at this. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it can't be manipulated or tweaked in some ways. So instead of like that constant repetition of you're trying mantras, you're like, I'm a confident person. I'm a confident person. You are not going to believe that. If you don't feel like you are a confident person, you're not going to believe that no matter what you do. But you can look at this and say, okay, I have proof that I am confident or I'm good with money. I paid off a credit card. I negotiated salary. I saved for my first emergency fund and I feel great about that. Or I even had a really difficult conversation with my partner about money and that was really hard. I left a situation that was super unhealthy. And those are all things that your brain will see as evidence or of proof of the new identity or the new beliefs you're trying to instill in yourself. And each of those small accomplishments that you focus on, those little wins, it starts to build evidence that you are a capable and worthy person. Another way we can start to build our self-worth is to compare less, reflect more. What I mean by this is instead of constantly going on social media or looking around at your family and your friends or your coworkers and seeing everything that they have that you don't, if you can start to slowly detach from that and be excited and celebrate someone's financial progress without making it mean anything about you, you're on the right track. And a lot of times what happens is when a coworker gets a new house and they earn a similar amount of money as you, you might look at that and say, what the heck? I deserve that too. I don't understand why I'm not at that level. Why can't I afford it? We start to just really internalize this instead of just stepping back and saying, okay, what does this mean about me? I don't need to make this mean anything about me. It doesn't have any reflection of who I am as a person. It doesn't have any reflection of my progress or what I'm proud of. It has nothing to do with me. Start to build up the habit of comparing yourself to where you were a year ago instead of where you are today or where your coworker is. It's just never going to serve you and it's a constant battle. Okay, lastly, I'm going to say that when you're in the journey of building up your self-worth, it is important that you choose relationships that reinforce your value. Not all relationships are created equal, and sometimes different relationships bring out different sides of us. Some that we're proud of, some that we're not proud of. If you're starting to boost up your self-worth in order to have a better self-esteem as well, this is something that you have to be very cognizant of and very guarded on. You need to understand that you can celebrate your growth and you want somebody in your corner that celebrates with you, not backhanded compliments or small diminishing comments. You want somebody that is really supportive and thoughtful and wants the best for you truly. You also want somebody that respects your boundaries. This is a big one too when you're starting to boost up your self-worth. Somebody that you are constantly having bickering with on boundaries is not going to help you. It's going to just take away a lot of that. You also want people that encourage your goals and support you and are excited and motivating for you. And when you say you're going to accomplish something, they hold you accountable to that, and they're proud of you and they celebrate with you. Those are the people you want in your corner for sure. And also people that don't make you shrink to keep the peace. We all have those people in our lives where we feel like we can't be truly who we are. We can't really talk about our accomplishments or little things that we're proud of or some goals or aspirations that we have. We have to shrink because it's never good enough and it can cause tension if we talk about it. Those are the people to avoid when you're trying to boost up your self-worth. So at the end of the day, self-worth is not believing that you're better than everybody else. It's believing that you have value just because you are a human being and you are living. It's believing that you're worthy of respect, of love, of wealth. It's believing that you're worthy to be in the room when other people might be telling you you're not. And when your self-worth isn't tied to other people's opinions or external validation or needing approval from somebody else, you make financial decisions from a place of confidence instead of fear, and that impacts so much. All right, guys, that was it for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Take one key point that you learned, something that resonated with you, and apply it this week into your life. And let me know what that is. I'd be so curious to see what that is for you. That's it for this week. I'll see you next week for another episode of the Money Nerds podcast. Bye.